Just as it seemed things were calming down at the Quadomain post-election, there are several events this weekend at the Quadomain noteworthy enough to discuss, which we will get to shortly. But first I have an ask of this community, which is to start cooling down the temperature. Put the knives away, so to speak. It gets too easy, especially with the Facebook groups, to go on the offense or attack. Though I'm not on any of these groups, I could relate, hence how some of these videos started. First started to vent, and in some cases I went on the offense, but it was always based on an action. It was based on mismanagement of policy or bad governance, or some kind of action, primarily backed up by documents, contracts, meeting minutes, other official records. It was brought to my attention Sunday on one of the Facebook groups that there was an attack on a board member, basically implying they received something for nothing. The detail itself doesn't matter, as I don't want to give it more life than it already had on the message board. But a single post turned into a thread, and you can imagine the typical back and forth one might expect when something is born from a baseless accusation, or in other posts sometimes just plain outright character attacks. Though I'd like to keep these videos educational and tutorials in nature to help us all be more aware and better so we could grow as a community and have better leadership, I will still call things out no matter what it is when something is out of bounds, in my opinion. Now don't get me wrong, shitposting is called that for a reason, but even that too could go too far. And all I'm saying is you have a responsibility to self-check yourselves. Sometimes giving things a break and giving space and time for something to breathe is the best medicine. And what not better time than now, as a rec board is about to newly reorganize. I'm working from the assumption that for the most part, these rec board members are community-minded and goodwill people wanting to get it right. And I think us as a community should recognize that, give the benefit of the doubt, and attempt to support that. I'd like to think, in light of some recent changes from the prior rec board, that the message has been received that accountability matters. So let us all work from that point of view and see where it goes and what happens. With that said, let's get started.
Why are there so many cars like this? Is there an event?
Activity, the
Social hall?
social hall.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're all in agreement this is a collective what the fuck moment. Ramps are not parking spaces, and if the fire department was here, they'd be fining us. This was happening all day Saturday, and at the time I recorded this, these cars were parking for free. They didn't turn their keys in. The valet lost all control. But can you blame them? They were blindsided. They had no idea what they were walking into that day. Remember that funny little email blast we got from condo control saying how the social hall was booked, a typo, from 8 a.m. to 8 a.m.? In reality, it was an all-day event, and it was booked fair and square by a resident who invited a good 100 people, and there was signage that said T-Game Fest. Looked like at least 100 people playing board games all day, probably in some kind of tournament fashion. Don't know much more, but it probably doesn't matter, and I hope they had a good time. But we had one valet and one security clueless as to what was going on. They had no advance warning or notice to really know this was happening, and we're most vulnerable on the weekend because where is management? What instructions, if any, were given on Friday the day before to anticipate the problems that could happen because of the size of this event? Part of the problem is the public parking over by Magnolia has been cordoned off for some time, so it's logical there'll be that much more demand to park in our valet, which was obviously completely filled and overflowed all day long. And as fast as a car left, another car filled its spot, all for free. But who wants to tell in excess of 70 plus visitors that valet is full and they're on their freaking own to figure out where to park anywhere but here? Oh, what a bad first impression there would be to a first-time visitor to our place, that they'd be so inconvenienced to have to walk a few extra blocks to get here and find parking like everyone else out on one of the side streets. The irony is we're treating strangers like royalty, but yet those of us who decline from any biometrics in some cases are forced to be like visitors and have to walk around the block and walk up 2 ramps just to get home. So let's stop pretending turning this place into Club Med or a resort or some 4-star hotel chain. So this was recorded Saturday 2:30 p.m. near the end of the first shift. I returned later closer to 4 p.m. on the second shift, where we didn't have a valet, just a security guy who was handed this mess and managed to get word to Alex, the manager, who was off-site, who did then respond and act promptly and asked the security guy to shake down some of the people still in the social hall to pay for the spots on the ramp. It's one thing during the week if you have FedEx, Amazon, postal workers, or Uber, or other forms of delivery. They're doing quick loading or unloading perhaps, but that's where the leniency ends. We can't have anyone parking on the ramps anymore ever. again, especially for free. We have no situational awareness around here. Staff needs the courtesy of being better informed so they know what they're walking into, so they have a context as to what's going on if there are special circumstances or changing needs on a given day or a given shift. I guess it's official. The staff now work in the land of the blind as much as we are. Speaking of blind, let's talk about blind auctions, or actually in this case, public cry auctions, which was another event also taking place Saturday late afternoon as a private event over at the restaurant, overlapping with the tea game fest happening in the social hall. For all we know, the cars parked on the ramp were the people with the auction.
1 for 20, 25, 25, 30, 30, 35, 35, 40, 40, 40, 45, 45. So I got 50 for the black t-shirt, 50 for the black t-shirt. 50? Sold.
So how did we go from a restaurant that is supposed to be strictly for our private use and enjoyment to only sometimes available to us once in a while when they're not shutting it down for a private event? Now take a closer listen to the auctioneer talking about online and chat groups. They were holding a live simultaneous auction, live in person and online.
30, I got 30. 30 for the black football shorts. Going once? Anyone online? You look like the black football shorts. Say anything in the chat, raise your hand. Going once. 30. 35. Taking 35 for the black football shorts. Takers? Sold, 35.
Now, are we as unit owners even informed about this or have any idea? We have to walk over to the restaurant and be surprised that we can't be served because they're busy entertaining people from the public that have nothing to do with us? And let's be very clear about this. That's exactly what happened, because there was no Quatermain resident that invited the people who conducted the auction here. The following day, I asked the folks at the restaurant what was that all about. They said it was students and some professors from the University of Miami that booked with them to hold that auction here. I asked how was that connected to any Quatermain residents, and they said it had nothing to do with us. Flat out saying they have the right to book whatever they want from the outside on our grounds. And as offensive that you might find this, since it flies in the face of the private use and enjoyment clause built into our documents, can you blame them for thinking that way when the restaurant lease agreement had the added words, members of the general public? That language didn't get there by accident. All of this was intentional, and no one on the rec board has yet answered to it. And the rec lawyer knew better and did it anyway. Now maybe that's a legitimate debate. What kind of community do we want to be? Do we want to be semi-open to the public? And for what? What's our benefit? What, we get a little extra revenue from it? Enough to make any meaningful difference? Are we looking to pimp out Quatermain like an auction to the highest bidder? We could start renting out the ramps, premium parking to the highest bidder. We could pimp out the social hall next to Art Basel. They could use extra space. It's expanding so much in Miami. Heck, we could even find unit owners to officiate weddings in there. But the point is, it never came to the community. No one ever asked. And these were most likely decisions of 2 or 3 people at most, some of which probably still are on the board that we don't have a straight answer for. So how do you put that genie back in the bottle? How do you unwind that and draw better lines? And have an honest conversation with this community to strike a balance that's a compromise for all of us who live here. I'll tell you one thing, looking the other way is not a solution. And I don't have any immediate answers of how to solve it, but this is one big mess that the prior rec board put us in. And lastly, I am tired of the restaurant vehicles that are parked non-stop on the ramps most days of the week. And in 1 or 2 cases, I've even seen a van parked there overnight. And even worse, our breezeways are a freaking joke with all the kitchen equipment hanging around, all the surplus equipment. It is just gross and disgusting and tiresome. And we all know what we're talking about because we're probably walking past it every day. It's a freaking mess. And I don't understand who's given the green light to say this is acceptable. It's bullshit and it's got to stop. And on that note, I'm wishing everyone a great week ahead.